Is Eric Clapton the second most influential musician of the 20th century? When I first saw this topic, I thought the answer was obvious: no. But as I thought about it, it turns out that now I'm leaning towards yes, and I'm going to tell you why. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I'm Utkarsh coming to you from Singapore. Welcome from my bedroom. I'm not in my studio. If you want to know why, you can see the video over here. But it's a good change of pace, and in case you're wondering why I'm not wearing my blazer, it's a bit strange wearing a blazer in a bedroom, right? Anyway, the blazer's still there if you're missing it. Okay, enough about the blazer. To answer this question about Eric Clapton, I need to take you a little far away from where he comes from England, and I need to take you to a volcanic lake, an ancient volcanic lake very, very, very far away from where you are. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. Think a little bit like Hallstatt, where you have a lake high up in the mountains in Austria. Something similar, but on a much, much, much larger scale. And it's in Indonesia, Lake Toba, T-O-B-A, Lake Toba. Now, why do I take you to Lake Toba to talk about Eric Clapton? Well, about 10, or it could be 11 or 12 years ago, I went on a trip to Lake Toba with my friend. We live in Singapore, and we just needed to get out, right? Sometimes you just need to get out of the country, just for, just so bored. And you're young and restless. And we're tired of all the usual locations, Bali, Thailand, Phuket, whatever you have you. We wanted something cheap, something different, something close. So we decided to go to Lake Toba, which was not very far from us because we just had to take a flight to an Indonesian city. And there we had to take a car there. Went to the city. The airport was a little bit troublesome, but we'll talk about that later. We had to take a cab. And turns out we did some mess up in the booking, so we couldn't get a cab. So we decided to take a local bus, which was an interesting experience. We got into the bus. Firstly, we were not the only passengers on the bus. Obviously, there were other people, villagers, chickens, goats. Yes, these were our co-passengers in the bus. And a one-legged guitarist. Yes, a one-legged guitarist. And the bus ride, I'm forgetting how long it is, but I remember going up some mountains or something. And of course, the one-legged guitarist regaled us with, songs. A lot of them were local Indonesian songs. But what I found very distinct was, maybe it was because he was playing it on guitar, that it just felt so familiar. Of course, the words and bahasa were nothing I could understand, but just the overall structure. The typical semi-blues, semi-pentatonic structure that you associate with so many songs, that if you translate anything from Oasis to a Beatles song on acoustic, you get a certain feel for it. Beatles, of course, has some very progressive stuff, but you know what I mean. It's a general structure, any rock song. It felt very similar. And also he did play a song that all of us may recognize, which is Lela. The point is not about this one-legged Indonesian guitarist or Lake Toba. The point is that the generic rock structure, the rock song structure, which has certain, almost a 4-chord progression, the general pop progression, a pentatonic way in which sometimes and the guy played solos, by the way. He used to just play something, then play a nice licks, so almost like a solo. That generic rock song structure, with the way the song is structured, with the way you have a pentatonic solo in it, that general vibe, it is so widespread beyond just the typical rock music that you and I listen to on this channel. This is Tak Besaka, a very famous Indonesian song. I'm deliberately talking on top of it so that, copyright is not an issue. Check it out, by the way. Now, I'm, of course, talking with the experiences that I know. Of course, Japan is a whole different ballgame, where guitar has been taken to whole different levels. But even if I go to think about Malaysia nearby me, if you listen to local Malaysian songs, I've been to a few local Malay weddings, and you'll be shocked at the kind of amazing guitar solos that are churned out. Those are in the local songs. If you go to India, which is where I'm from, I've talked about this at length, that there's an entire subculture of relatively frustrated college students just forced to study a lot, and their recourse to get out of that is basically rock music. I was totally part of that. This is a song called Nagin, the Lady Cobra. Obviously, the tapping is very Eddie Van Halen inspired, but taken in a very Indian direction. And where did Eddie Van Halen get his inspiration from? He learned all of Eric Clapton note for note before he got into everything else. By the way, check out the run that comes up. The influence of that rock archetype, where you have a certain song structure and you have a guitar solo which is pentatonic based, that has a remarkable amount of reach in the world. Remarkably, like you could go just about anywhere. Of course, I have I have no experience with the African continent, so I cannot speak to that. But everywhere where I've gone, it's just remarkable how I find it everywhere. Like the most famous song ever in Hong Kong. Check it out. If you were to think of an American import that you find everywhere, you may think McDonald's or fast food. Not really. Fast food is sometimes too expensive and too complicated for different places, for small towns, for rural places. But the guitar, whether it's an acoustic or an electric, with that particular structure, that's gone everywhere. And when I think about that, I also think of another story. And bear with me. I used to work for Gillette, an American company. Well, rather Procter & Gamble. And about 15 years ago, we were making an advertisement that we were launching some product with the razor that I know exactly what it is, but I don't want to bore you. So there's a razor where the whole thing pivots. So they had made an advertisement called the one-stroke shave. I'm going to play that in a bit over here. Let me bear with you. What does have to do with Eric Clapton? So the one-stroke shave was basically one razor going up and down the face. You can, rather than shaving multiple strokes, you take one stroke. So what happens is when you work in marketing like I did, and I was relatively junior at the time, you basically are in charge of presenting the advertising to the sales force to tell them, hey, this is something. And this advertisement came straight from the US. It wasn't an advertisement that I made. There were different advertisements. Some were made globally, some were made by me locally. But this one was made globally in Boston or something. So we went to show it to the sales force in Thailand. Okay? And I'm going to play the beginning of it over here. And watch out what happens right in the beginning when the music starts playing. Heard it? So what basically happened is when that started, everybody in the in the organization started laughing, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realized that song that was being played, it was not a Thai song, it was a Cambodian song, but the languages are similar enough that you can understand it. And when you look up what that song was, it was basically, again, if you look at the structure of it, starts with guitar. It's a rock song with a little bit of a local flavor. This is a song from Cambodia from the 1970s, covered by a modern American Cambodian band, which is what was used for the Gillette ad. But if you look at the song, the original song of the 1970s called Shave Your Beard, you can recognize the influence of the general rock movement on it. And think of how far removed Cambodia, this is not Vietnam, though it's nearby Vietnam. It's not the Vietnam War and the American GIs going to Vietnam that you're talking about. Cambodia has got nothing to do with the US. At this point in time in the 1970s when the song is made, what's going on? A major communist uprising, the Khmer Rouge, a major genocide is going on. Because the communists take over the country and they try to kill everybody, a bit like the Cultural Revolution in China. Right? Got nothing to do with the US, got nothing to do with rock and roll. Yet you can see the rock and roll structure permeate in a popular song from that time, Shave Your Beard. Rather tragic story behind the singer of the song. Look it up sometime. We're going to put up a name here. Recently, when I went to Cambodia last year, of course, the whole thing has long passed. But a tragic story about how a lot of the usual society was completely upended by the Khmer Rouge. That's a separate story, but her song lives on. So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that if you accept the premise that the rock archetype has permeated across the world in the 20th century in a way like no other form of music. I can't think of any other form of music that has permeated all over the world like the rock archetype. It just, there isn't, right? You could say pop, but pop ultimately, even modern pop, we are leaving aside hip hop. And hip hop has certainly not permeated into the villages of Indonesia or Thailand or the small towns of Malaysia. It's very urban now, even in these countries. So if you accept that in the 20th century, the rock archetype is the one that has the maximum penetration. Penetration means, sorry, it's a very marketing term, means more people do it, not what you are thinking. Don't think that. If you accept that, then you have to examine who is responsible for defining that typical rock archetype, that blues-based rock archetype, with which ultimately has a certain kind of song structure and a certain kind of guitar mechanics associated with, including a pentatonic guitar solo. You could say Robert Johnson, but if you listen to actually Robert Johnson, you'll realize it's very, very primitive is not the word, but it's very, very early. There's a very early in the evolution of the rock song. And you have to really give it to Eric Clapton, because Eric Clapton is ultimately at the basis, everything that happened with what's the name of the record? Oh, the Beano record, right? That influences everyone. That influences strong structure. That influences the guitar solo dramatically. The guitar solo, if you listen to the guitar solos of the Elvis songs, you could say rock and roll started with Elvis. And I kind of agree. But if you look at the original Elvis songs or stuff that the Shadows were doing, etc., it's very different from the rock archetype. It's there, you can kind of see shades of it, but the definition of it with the pentatonic guitar solo and the pentatonic becoming a big part of songwriting, you have to give it to Eric Clapton, actually. I think so. Because everybody, when you think of Jimmy Page, when you think of Jimi Hendrix, a lot of them came concurrently with Clapton, but ultimately the root started with how Clapton was playing his electric guitar. So this is why, after much thought, even though initially the idea of Eric Clapton being the second most influential musician seemed very crazy to me, now I'm not so sure. I very definitely can see the argument for it, particularly given how I have seen rock permeate all sorts of places over the years, not just the usual Europe and Americas, but well beyond. Anyways, this is my perspective. I'd love to know what you think, and I'll see you next time.